Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Hidden Truths Project. If not us, then who? Online forum. Before we get started, I hope you enjoyed the presentation with the artwork and the music provided by Guy Stoker. It reminds us of how creativity sets the mood and can set the tone to connection and healing. Today, we're going to be exploring how music can support people living with epilepsy. It's a powerful subject, and we're honored to have Guy W. Stoker with us to share his insights and his experiences. Just a quick note, this session is being recorded and so that we can continue to learn from it after today. If you could keep yourself muted throughout the presentation, that will help with keep the flow and the internet going great. And thank you again for being here. So let's dive in. Back to you, Julie.
First, I recognize many of you in the audience, but for those of you that are new to me anyhow, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us at this kind of odd time of day. We're trying to encompass as many time zones as possible. And this is our end of the year forum, If Not Us, and Who, Musical Medicine Where Science Integrates with Art. For those of you who are new to Hidden Truths Project, our work has been involved in engaging individuals that live with visible and invisible disabilities, but it's heavily focused in epilepsy. And what we do is we provide a creative platform so they can tell their stories from the inside out, that part of their lives that typically remain hidden, buried, not discussed because of the repercussions of revealing you have epilepsy. So it truly is their lived story from the inside out, difficult to articulate. And the art forms that we use include all media. So that includes music, which leads us to today. And it's well known that music can influence our brain, our body, and our cognition, all which help us shape our world and make sense of our world. Music can soothe or be unsettling. It saturates everything in our lives. It can be the busy streets to a concert hall, to radios, earbuds, any form of screen time has some type of sound. So it can uplift us, it can overwhelm us, it can shape the emotional landscape of a film. It can evoke memories, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. It can influence our mood through the rhythm, sounds, tones, pitches, harmonies, and beats. And it penetrates deeply into the brain and involves many different parts of the brain. But its values extend well beyond its a set of qualities. Musical medicine, where science integrates with art, will invite you all to have some deep thought into exploring how music can intersect with epilepsy, health, and human experience. And our goal for today is to provide an introspective reflection on what it means to live with epilepsy as told through music. It will highlight the roles of music in engaging diverse audiences from across all borders. It can foster a dialogue between people with epilepsy, the public, scientific experts, and people in the creative arts. And it will highlight the use of music to raise awareness, educate, and amplify voices for those who have been marginalized, stigmatized, have been silenced, or misunderstood. What's really beautiful about what's happening in technology and science today is we've been able to demonstrate how music affects multiple areas of the brain, and it can actually modulate the release of certain neurochemicals in our brain, including endorphins, cytokines, and endogenous hormones. For example, if you listen to Mozart's, there's research showing that Mozart's sonatas K205, 448, and 545, they've been linked to increase in dopamine synthesis, which leads to reduction in blood pressure, changes in calcium-related signaling. And then if you go further into positron emission tomography of the brain, you can actually see these complex interactions between music, neurotransmission, and seizure activity. So music has the ability to convey internal experiences, insights, emotional states that can be difficult to articulate. It provides a unique form of communication that can deepen our understanding of what it means to live with a chronic misunderstood condition like epilepsy. It's been shown it can reduce anxiety, stress, depression, loneliness, and other psychological issues through social engagement, strengthening connections, which basically help improve overall well-being. but it can also trigger seizures, musicogenic epilepsy. And interestingly enough, the part of the brain that is involved in this is called the amygdala, which it has emotional and cognitive components. And what we've seen, it's not only central to emotions, memory, and learning, but it is also felt to be the epileptogenic region that can trigger even some of these seizure types. But before I delve any deeper, I think it's time to turn it over to Guy Stoker. He's a friend, a longtime artist with Hidden Truths Project, pianist, composer, singer-songwriter from Northumberland, UK, and now resides in Paris, which I had the great opportunity of meeting with him this summer. He is an independent researcher, author, public speaker who investigates the intersection between music and epilepsy. He has lived with epilepsy since early childhood. And then he also, at that time, underwent his musical training, which led to a master's degree in contemporary composition in 2010. He first integrated his musical training and expanded this into research on the impact on epilepsy. He's used music as a medium to explore and articulate lived experience of epilepsy. His most recent project we'll be showcasing today is Purple Universe, investigating the intersection of music and epilepsy. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Guy Stoker with Purple Chorus.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, Julie, that is the most comprehensive of any introduction I've ever had in my life. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to bring this up right now, and hopefully at the moment you can see the same as I can. And once I press play on here, I will bring the lyrics up as well. So this first, well, how I'm going to start is actually from a track from Purple Universe called I'm Your Epilepsy. And some of you might be surprised as to what you're about to hear, but I will explain the reasons for the structure and content thereafter. So here we go. I am here, I am there. You think I'll come, I'm everywhere. Your special friend, right to the end. I'm epilepsy. I'm your smile, upside down. Or your, let's say, I'm a frown. I'm your scary circus clown. I'm epilepsy. Bite on this, give me a spoon. Some people say it's the moon. How many names, how many faces you'll see? Go hard as they try, I'm not for saying goodbye. But for now, it's you later on me. Then you can hold me around or a smile upside. You can kiss any name you want to be. Hold me George, for the falling sea. Here I am. I'm your epilepsy. Here I am. I'm your epilepsy. Good night. So there we are. And now I shall bring it back to myself, hopefully. And although I can't see me now, I don't know if you can. The thing about rehearsals is it always works so well in rehearsal and then doesn't afterwards. One moment. Stop.
I think all you have to do is stop sharing.
Okay. I have to. That's it. Here I am. Yeah. Okay. So, after being out in the wilderness for a few minutes there, that song was called I'm Your Epilepsy. And some people might be thinking, well, that's a rather bizarre approach to it, a rather strange way to approach a song about such a serious subject as epilepsy. And in fact, one person who heard it when it was first written earlier this year said they were quite disturbed by the way that it was presented. And I explained to them that rather than that song being me poking fun at either myself or anybody else with epilepsy, that song is actually the voice of epilepsy. So it's not my voice, it's the voice of the epilepsy saying to me and or whoever is living with it, it doesn't matter what pills and potions and lotions and everything else you try, I'm not going anywhere. Because as most of us know, at this present time, there is no such thing as a cure for epilepsy. So therefore, once it's here, it's here. And I was first directed towards that by a show by the actress and filmmaker Sandra Cruz, who's also been on this very platform. And she wrote a musical about epilepsy called Abby Normal. And that kind of sparked my interest in writing this new album, Purple Universe, and creating the corresponding website, Purple Chorus. Uh, and it's interesting because there's not very many cases that you will find where it's actually the condition itself that is given the microphone, so to speak. Uh, and whilst it sounds very jolly, very glitz and glamour and big band and top hat and cane, it's quite like an onion, really, in the fact that it has many layers to it. If you strip that first layer of glitz and glamour off, and you look at the lyrics to that, it is basically it is basically quite a quite a dark content, really. And it's saying you can doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to be here whether you like me or you don't. And that is actually a songwriting technique that's been used by many people before, including Sting, when he wrote the song Every Breath You Take, which sounds like a great, beautiful love song, and people think, oh, I love that song. Every breath you take, every move you make, etc. And then you look at the lyrics and you think, oh, it's not really quite that beautiful after all. It's about somebody stalking. It's about from the perspective of the stalker saying, I'm going to follow you wherever you go. I'm going to watch everything you do all the time, night and day. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter when. I'll be watching you. So in that sense, it's not quite as beautiful a song as the outside layer first perceives. So so you've heard the first track there. Now, Purple Universe was actually my second album in the medium of epilepsy art from a composer perspective. My first came during my master's in contemporary composition. I identified that actually there wasn't very much at all authentic musical representation of the experience of epilepsy. So there were lots of artists and bands either calling themselves or their work epilepsy or seizure, but in most of those cases, they were using the word seizure or epilepsy as a synonym for sexualization or orgasm. And I thought, well, that that does kind of leave a great big gaping hole in that niche in the area of epilepsy art. There were some fantastic um, genuine examples, however. The work of Dr. Cynthia Folio, who was based at Temple University. She was a professor of composition, and her daughter had profound epilepsy. And she wrote a 20-minute piece called When the Spirit Catches You. And it features narration from her daughter. And I actually got in touch with Dr. Folio at the time, and I said, I'm curious to know why a piece about an episode which normally lasts just a few minutes is 20 minutes long. And she said, in that time when you are watching somebody you love having an epileptic seizure and knowing that there's absolutely nothing whatsoever you can do about it, then those 2 or 3 minutes seem like more like 2 or 3 hours. And I thought that's a really valid point. And of course, the beauty of music is that it allows you to stretch time. It doesn't, the music that you write to represent something doesn't have to be in real time, which is one of the beautiful things to have at your disposal as an artist. And another great example was Kansas State University actually created a musical model of an epileptic seizure using a famous Mozart piece in order that people would recognize it and know how it should sound, whether they followed classical music or not. And what it did was it was Dr. Brian Kip Harheim, who was another professor of composition. And it followed what I call the rainbow shape of the epileptic seizure. So the build up, the climax, and the coming back down. And it basically follows exactly what an epileptic seizure does, but without saying a single word. So it starts off as you would recognize it, then through orchestral manipulation, such as adding instruments in, taking instruments out, adding phrases, taking phrases away, it just basically descends completely into something totally unrecognizable and totally dysfunctional. And following that, the reversal of that process, it slowly but surely becomes recognizable in the fact that it's indicating the recovery stage. So it's coming back to where it was before, slowly but surely, rather than instantaneously. And so there were some great examples, but the only one I could find at that time, which was by an artist who actually lived with epilepsy themselves, was the late Jim Armstrong. He was a Canadian singer-songwriter and guitarist from Toronto, and he was an absolutely lovely man. I was fortunate enough to speak to him on a number of occasions, and he'd written a song called Angel in Our Corner. and the lyrics were just so absolutely bang on. And the subject of Angel in Our Corner is the importance of strength and unity within relationships of people with epilepsy, and the unpredictability as well, because one day you can feel absolutely great and get on with life perfectly fine and not need an external person at all. And then the next day, bang, and you need somebody there to be able to pick you up, dust you off, help you back until you're ready to feel great again. So that person is the angel in our corner. And it was such a fantastic example. And sadly, Jim is no longer with us. He died a few years later. But his, as I say, was the only songwriting example I found by a songwriter with epilepsy about their own experience. And it took many, many years to find another authentic uh, example of such. And one of the people who I know has been authentically done exactly that is actually here with us this evening, which is Turner Bates, who again I was fortunate enough to talk with a few weeks back. Now, Turner was diagnosed with epilepsy in his teens, and as he's a country artist and singer-songwriter, he, like me, turned to songwriting in order to explore and express that experience of living with epilepsy. Now, in total, I've written somewhere in the region of about 30 tracks about the experience of epilepsy. Not all have been autobiographical, but quite a lot of them have. And quite often, when you heard in I'm Your Epilepsy, quite often when people go through a traumatic experience and they don't want to take ownership of it, they don't want to say this is me, or I feel like this, or this is my experience. Songwriting is actually a perfect mechanism to be able to give the ownership of the experience away to somebody else. So it becomes my friend. And that's a classic example. That's not just in music and epilepsy, but that is also patients going through traumatic experience such as cancer or addiction or other forms of traumatic experiences where they don't want to say this song is about me, so therefore they say this song is about this character. And a great example of that is actually in literature is Alice in Wonderland. It's believed that actually Alice was Lewis. There is actually a rare form of epilepsy known as Alice in Wonderland syndrome. And when you take all of the contents or description of symptoms of an Alice in Wonderland syndrome, and you take the main bullet points of the contents of the story out, you have a pretty perfect match. So in the story, it talks about the sensation of falling down a hole. It talks about a disproportion of the surroundings. It talks about things that aren't actually there, uh, being there and speaking. The eat me, drink me could be the medication, the Jabberwocky being the brain itself, and the battle of the cards being the neuronal activity. So when you put all of those pieces together, you have a perfect description of an epileptic seizure. And why I think music is such an underrated tool is when you look at the complexity and diversity and history of epilepsy, then I think you need something equally as powerful and complex and diverse as music to be able to fill in some of those missing gaps, because quite often the experience is such that it is non-comparable. You can't say, you can't always say it feels like X, Y, or Z, because sometimes there aren't words for X, Y, or Z, but music is able to step in and convey those experiences, those feelings of fear, those feelings of euphoria, those feelings of not knowing what's going to happen next, those feelings of isolation and frustration, etc., without having to say anything at all. And the beauty of that is that music, in that sense, can reach across linguistic boundaries. So, someone who doesn't speak the same language as any of us could still get the same emotional impact and emotional response as the person, as someone who does speak our own language. And it's a brilliant tool to be able to use. And when I wrote the first album, which I was telling you about earlier, Hidden Truths, sorry, no, not Hidden Truths Project, um, Ictal Variations. Ictal Variations is a 20-track album, and it uses lots of different musical genre. It uses songwriting, it uses regular composition techniques, i.e., 5 lines, 4 spaces, etc. It also uses sound art. It also uses what's called graphic score, which is whereby you use something else to represent the score form. And in the case of my own work, what I did was I took my own EEG reading and I looked at the shape of the movement of the lines, each line of the EEG, and assigned an instrument to that particular line. So rather than it being a series of particular notes, it was actually using the brainwave activity to dictate the shape of the melody. And another example, which I was actually inspired by Dr. Jim Chambliss. Uh, he's an artist who's been represented with yourselves as well. And he had late onset epilepsy following a serious road accident. And one of the ways he coped with that new diagnosis was to take a Rubik's Cube, or the idea of a Rubik's Cube, and he created paintings, a different painting on each square of the Rubik's Cube as part of his journey with coming to terms with that new identity and new diagnosis and new challenges. And that was featured in Stephen Schachter's book, Visions. And I thought, well, that's actually a really great idea. And I met Jim in Prague in 2010, I think it was. And I said, well, actually, I know what the musical equivalent of that would be. So, in musical terms, there is a 6-note scale called the whole tone scale. And what I did was I took each side of the Rubik's Cube and assigned a degree of the whole tone scale to a color of the Rubik's Cube. If you controversially accept white as a color, that's a whole different discussion because some people say no, it isn't. but for the sake of this conversation, yes, it was. So therefore, I had from the Rubik's Cube a musical score, but there was deliberately no further indication at all. So there was no assignment of instrumentation. So it could be a flute, it could be a double bass, it could be drum kit, it could be voice, could be absolutely anything whatsoever. So therefore, every time a new ensemble or a new musician interprets that Rubik's Cube as a graphic score, it is going to sound unique. And the reason for that is because every single person around the world who lives with epilepsy is unique. And every time you twist that cube, you have a new musical score. And the only thing that glues it all together in that physical context is the Rubik's Cube, which symbolizes epilepsy itself. And that was one of the pieces out of the 20 that I was particularly very, very pleased with. So fast forward to Purple Universe, which you heard a track of just a few minutes earlier. There's another 9 tracks on that album, and you'll be glad to know I'm not going to do all 9 of them. But they actually cover various different musical genres. So there's a country track in there, there's a rock track in there. As you've heard, there's a big band track. There's music theatre style tracks. There's mainstream pop as well. And again, the reason for that diversity in musical genre is to highlight the diversity not only of epilepsy, but of the more than 65 million people around the world who live with it as well. And it's always been my conviction that if you're going to represent something as diverse as epilepsy through the genre of music, then that diversity has to, in some way, shape, or form, come across. Otherwise, in my own work, I believe I would have completely missed the ball. And it was a really interesting process of writing that album because I knew that I wanted to get across as many issues as possible without repeating myself. So, for example, there are issues about relationships. There are issues about feeling isolated. There are issues about wanting to be seen as a person, not just a tag number or a patient number. There are issues about how the seizure itself makes you feel directly afterwards, because it's been said a few times that actually out of the 3 ictal stages, the most difficult for the patient is actually the post-ictal, because that in during that point the patient is conscious, but actually the brain is basically rebooting itself whilst you're trying to function. So it would be basically the same as trying to write an assignment whilst your computer was rebooting itself, regardless of what you were wanting to do. So there's a few people said that actually the post-ictal stage is the most difficult for the epilepsy patient to experience. And how am I doing for time, Julian? I've stopped watching my clock. How am I doing for time? Am I doing all right for time? Yeah. Um, is it almost time to wrap my talking side up and go out with the song? Uh, Okay. So I will do exactly that. And the song I'm going to finish my initial part of the presentation with is called Ride the Wave. Now, Ride the Wave is a song about relationships, but again, this song is actually from the perspective of the angel in the corner, if you like, the other person who lives with somebody who has epilepsy. And it's basically giving them a sense of hope and a sense of grounding and a sense of belonging. And it's saying to the person who's experiencing the seizures, I know this is hard. I know you've gone through a hard time. I know you've gone through a difficult time, and this feels awful. But actually, despite that, I'm not going anywhere at all. And also, it's a kind of reassurance that even though things are really pretty horrible, that people can and do and will stick together. And I actually, for those of you who don't know, quite a few of you do, but for those of you who don't know, I actually work on cruise ships as my day job, if you like, here in Paris. And every week, pretty much, I will sing this particular song, "Ride the Wave," because it's very accessible to listen to, and so this is the very same said song, and as I say, it's called "Ride the Wave." And, I'm just gonna open it here. And that should be coming up very, very soon because it's only a little. There we go. Mm-hmm. Don't know why. Don't know why. That is set to audio. And I can't hear that. Let's see now. I can't hear that. Could you hear it? No. Right. Right. Sure. Sound. Try this now. You can't see your hand for the storm clouds, and you can't find them graces to stay. Just remember this isn't forever, and together we'll ride the wave. When you hear all the darkness around you, and the silence is all that you crave, just remember this isn't forever, my love, and together we'll ride the wave. It may seem like illumination in the battle, have the doubts and the demons of one. But be sure that whenever there's nighttime, where else there is always the sun. So take these words to help you forward. Never doubt that I see you are brave. In the merge of the storm clouds and candy, together we'll ride away. So take these words to help you move forward. Never doubt that I see you are brave. In the merge of the storm clouds and candy, together we'll ride away. Together we'll ride away. Together we'll ride away. There you are. And with that, I say, oh, thank you for the big hearts there, Julie. So on that sense, I say back to and Joyce. Uh, it's over to either Heidi or Joyce to take it from here. Thank you for all the love hearts, very kind. Uh, so.
We'd like to open up the discussion because I know there might be a lot of specific questions. So I just, well, actually, let's open the floor to the audience first, and then we can kind of direct the conversation from there. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Guy or anybody in the audience?
Yeah, hi. Hi,
Hi,
Julie,
Deb.
Heidi,
Hi.
and Guy. Um, that was lovely. And so I have a question. You said you used was it the EKG to go through your brain?
EEG.
The EEG, sorry, the
Yeah.
EEG.
Mhm.
How did that translate for you in terms of the notes? I've been fascinated by that.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it was very atonal. It was very kind of non-chromatic, as it were, because rather than it being a structured um, series of notes which was designed to fit diatonically and sound very nice when played together, it was actually simply using each individual line as a map, basically, for the shape of the melody. So
Right.
there are definitely clashes within that. But there again, in the context of the course that it was written for, which was a master's in contemporary composition, very often the nice and neat and feathery and sparkly bow music is what they very often want you to move away from in that sense. So they basically want to take all the rules of all the nice stuff and then say, right, well, forget that. Let's look at other ways that you can create music and sound as well. Uh, but two of those tracks are actually on the album Hidden Truths prod. Sorry, I keep saying Hidden Truths product. Ictal Variations, which both Julie and Heidi actually have the links to Ictal Variations if you wanted to give them a listen.
And Guy, wasn't is that also true for the song that we recently you shared with us, Amygdala, which is very dichotic and
Yes.
it's disturbing, unsettling. I mean, I love this song because I think my brain functions on ambiguity and the the difference in tones and intonations and being
Yes.
unsettled, you might say. But it's pretty powerful and
Uh-huh.
I don't know if we can share that or not, but it's
Um,
not it's kind of like art, there's a certain aesthetic in art that people define on symmetry and things. And then when you go off the beaten path and it's not, and there's ambiguity presented in art, people find it disturbing, but it's actually can be attract certain people just because of what it represents.
let me see if I can find it. Um, should be able to find it easy enough. There. Yes. Amygdala. Right. Um, Your screen share is paused. Hmm. Again, I'm having issues. Uh, it's on Zoom. No, so unfortunately, it might just be the size of the audience or something like that. But unfortunately, for the moment, it doesn't want to play ball. So, but yeah, again, you do have a copy of Amygdala. Uh,
Guy, I think it might be kind of interesting if you could share with people. I mentioned this briefly in my presentation. Although music can be very settling and decrease stress, anxiety, loneliness, and things like that, it can also elicit seizures. And interestingly enough, when they look at musicogenic epilepsy in that patient population, although it's a rare form of epilepsy, they found that many of them began their childhood and their lifetime really in tune with music. And then all of a sudden, there's this change that certain rhythms or tones or melodies will elicit that seizure. And they think it works through temporal lobe, maybe amygdala, things like that. And I don't know, Ian, you might know, and Guy, Ian is also on our board. He is a neurologist, or epileptologist. Him and I share the same thing. We both have adult sons with epilepsy. And you both have looked at this in much more depth. I'd love to hear your thoughts on musicogenic epilepsy and how it fits into this discussion.
Ian, you're muted at the moment.
I think, firstly, it's probably very rare. And it's not just music, it's sound as well. And I had a patient who used to have seizures when he heard church bells ringing. And it's not just music, it's sound itself. What interests me, though, is from the therapeutic point of view, and I was going to come back to Guy on that, that there is some music that seems to have therapeutic benefit. And the Mozart, I think is it the Mozart dual
Organ.
piano
Yeah.
concerto. I can't remember
Mhm.
which one it is, but it seems to have a therapeutic effect. And I wondered, Guy, if you'd looked into that, because there are very few other pieces of music that have been found to have that effect upon the EEG.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Dr. Melissa McGuire last week, who's a consultant neurologist based in Leeds in the UK. And she, along with Dr. Sally Baxendale, also based, well, who's based in London, are two of the very few neurologists who've actually looked at the direct correlation between music and epilepsy at all. And what Melissa proposed was perhaps there are other pieces of music out there that have exactly the same effect, but haven't yet been identified because of the prevalence of the reports towards Mozart. So she argues that perhaps because that Mozart piece was kind of identified first, that other pieces of music have kind of been pushed to one side, which may actually have exactly the same benefits, or may have exactly the same benefits, but to other people. And I know we have a classical musician in here, Martha. So I know you'd like to say something on that. So,
Yeah. Over and over, music therapists have figured out that it's different kinds of music for different people that are going to affect them. And Mozart, I'm sure, works on any number of people who are familiar. Um, there's certain kinds of music that would not help me at all. But I, for instance, go to really powerful stuff like the Brahms G major sonata, but part of that is because I know it so well. I've performed it so many times with somebody I really loved, and so it's in Brahms was an early person for me because there was a recording of the Brahms Requiem with Eleanor Stieber singing the solo, the soprano solo in that, and it became part of safety for me. And I think that's really key. Especially, I mean, I had amygdala focused seizures, and the amygdala, is part of that circuit of the brain that one of its jobs is to blare danger at the system, so the person jumps to protect themselves. But if you've got a sudden surge of electricity in that piece of the brain, it's horrifying. And it's so I went after really big, safe. I mean, my system did. I didn't even think about it, but safe pieces from when I was little. I started seizing when I was 3, so it went way back. But Mozart, I mean, sure, Mozart will have an effect on a lot of people, but there are people I bet it doesn't have any effect on.
hmm.
You know, I do. It was the Beethoven fourth piano concerto that I would go to as a really safe place. Because I don't know if people know that piece, but it starts just out of nowhere, and just solo piano. There's no orchestral, introduction, and it ends. I mean, that first phrase ends in a question mark. Um, in a 5 chord. So it's yeah, it really depends on what's internalized, I think, ahead of time.
Yeah.
There's some interesting work and there's an article by, I'm not going to pronounce the names right, Margin Rafia in Music and Epilepsy. And what they've been looking at is in individuals, like I was saying earlier, like, for example, you, Guy, who has had music in your life, your whole lifetime, and then you went into this and you have epilepsy. But they've shown that certain oscillations in the brain that, and so certain rhythms, tones, intonation, harmonics, and like you were saying, Ian, church bells for one particular person, it's normally when we're listening to the sound environment around us, we have these lower frequency oscillations in our brain, which allows us that we don't have seizures. But then in that population, for example, with musicogenic epilepsy, they're showing that there's these high fluctuation frequencies and oscillations in the brain then that synchronize at this higher frequency that lead to the seizures. And I'm wondering in your situation, Martha, and Guy, well, not Guy so much, but music, if you feel like there might be some form of neuroplasticity, because if you look at people that listen to Mozart, they repetitively have that, I think it's the Sonata 448 or that they listen to, and it decreases seizure frequency. It decreases these brainwave activity. And so if there's like a neuroplasticity involved through repetitive listening, that leads to that suppression of seizure activity.
Well, that could easily be. I mean, the I love one of the studies that shows that, for instance, just hearing it in your mind and hearing it physically produce the same kind of scan.
Yeah.
Imagine. Um, and the neuroplasticity piece is huge. I counted on it in a big way. I mean, I had my whole, I performed for 30 years, no, I performed professionally for 20 years before my whole right temporal lobe was taken out. And, and not only to no deficit, but I can memorize things better. Because the hippocampus and amygdala, which are memory,
Right.
and temporal lobe, were messing with the other side. But I started seizing when I was 3. I started playing the piano and then the violin, within a year and a half, the piano. And so you've got digits going. You want to get to a brain, get to the body, You've got digits going along with oral sensation, along with feeling sensation, along with, it's just a huge remapping of the brain. So they were able to take out an entire temporal lobe without affecting the music. The primary and secondary auditory systems are in the temporal lobe. So, I'm totally in love with neuroplasticity, and I'm sure. And you know what's really one of the cool facts is that any experience you go through rearranges things. And any music piece has affected, what does he say? It's like 880 billion neurons. And to experience that piece again, those neurons have to line up in their original state. That's kind of amazing. Which is why when they wanted to take out a bunch of brain, they were horrified because you have to put everything back in the right place to hear the piece again. And they were taking out amygdala, hippocampus, and temporal lobe. So, but so,
Yeah.
Guy, Chris Churchill asks, he says, brilliant, thank you. Would you please speak more to your fascinating point, how your music expresses a universal connection through our specific conditions of epilepsy rather than your music as a therapy?
So music as a means of expression, as you mean? Yeah. Okay. Music as an expression. Because in my own experience, I had about 8 different types of epileptic seizure over the years before I was actually diagnosed with epilepsy. So I had seizures ranging from what would previously be known as absence seizures, right through to tonic-clonic seizures, and all kinds of things, including hallucinations, audio hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and also another very rare one, which is known as T, as in the drink, which stands for transient epileptic amnesia. So that is where basically you can't remember anything at all, but you can't remember anything at all. You're actually fully aware that you can't remember anything whatsoever. And it's a very bizarre experience to be fully aware that actually your memory of everything has just been wiped clean. And that happened to me on 2 occasions. as did what's known as gelastic seizures, which is whereby your control of emotional ability is gone. So you might be crying your eyes out at absolutely nothing whatsoever, and then a matter of seconds later you're laughing hysterically again at nothing whatsoever. And it just goes like on that yo-yo, and you have absolutely no control of it whatsoever. So for me, what I wanted to do was to be able to convey some of those experiences um, without actually saying these are the experiences that I've had. So therefore, I used music as a means of exploring that experience and thinking, well, how can I express what I've gone through without saying this is what I've gone through? And because of the amount of musical genres out there and subgenres and choices of instrumentation and phrasing and everything like that, there is a huge myriad of availability to me as a composer to be able to say, well, okay, I want to convey the experience of feeling isolated. So I will look at different ways of doing that. If I want to, in some cases, I've wanted to convey the expression of feeling absolutely very, very depressed. And again, I explored ways of doing that. And one of the examples that I particularly liked um, of conveying the experience of what's referred to as post-ictal depression, which is something that I used to get terribly. I would come out of seizure feeling very, very, very low indeed, and just being on ground level basically, and just the recurring questions, why me? You know, why does it have to be me who has these seizures? Why can't it be some horrible person who's a murderer or a rapist or whatever? You know, why does it have to be me? You know, what have I done to deserve this kind of thing? You know, and also how many more times do I have to endure this? You know, what there's so many advancements in medicine. Why haven't they found one yet that will stop me having these horrendous experiences? You know, so I wanted to be able to kind of push all of that, all of those questions, all of those feelings through the musical medium. And I think the most prevalent way I did that was actually through a solo piano piece, which was called Reflections, which was on the Ictal Variations album. And it was actually one of those compositions that I didn't work on very hard at all because it was improvisation. So I knew that something was coming right there and then. So I simply pressed record and let it out. And what came out was exactly all of those things that I've just spoken about in one instrument in around about 3 minutes. So basically, everything I've just said in response to that, I said without saying a single word. And therefore, the beauty of that is it doesn't matter if somebody in the Far East or Scandinavia or Africa or any other country that doesn't speak the same language as me, they can listen to that and they will understand that how I've just described is exactly what I was feeling. And the idea, another idea behind my music is that it's not just me, because I'm not narcissistic enough to think that it's only me. There's more than 65 million people around the world who experience epilepsy. So the likelihood is what I'm experiencing, what I've experienced, will also be absolutely identically applicable to somebody else as well. And perhaps they didn't have an outlet or a mechanism to be able to say, well, this is how it feels, but actually there it is. You know, and that's happened with me, with songs, with visual art as well. There's been times I've looked at visual interpretations of the experience of epilepsy, and I just thought, that's exactly it. That picture there says it perfectly. I don't know who the artist is, don't know whether it's man, woman, or child, don't know what the nationality is or anything, but that piece of art says perfectly what I need to say.
Yeah, Guy, that's really interesting. And you've been at several of our events, and we have a number of artists, and I think you know Jude, for
I
example.
do.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and she actually will paint during her seizures. We had another artist that did her auras. She would capsulate them on her walls and things. And her husband used to get so frustrated because during her seizure, she would start coloring on the walls.
Mm.
And it was the aura stage. And we work with, Heidi knows this well, because we curate all the art. We have a number of artists that reflect their seizure experience, their aura, the post-ictal state. And like we share, art is a universal language, and art is, acting, performance, sculpting, written words, spoken words, music. And there is a resonance, and there's a resonance across the world. And we work on 6 continents with hundreds of artists. And even though we don't all speak the same language, the art speaks the same language.
It
And
does.
the stories all begin to intersect and sound. I could classify each of our artists into 5 categories of art based on their experience. And it's
Hmm.
unique because of their circumstances, but there's a resonance in terms of their storyline. And that's what our work with Hidden Truths Project is about, is connecting these stories and giving individuals a voice to share that story.
Hmm. I mean, when I was there at the gallery in California, I still remember to this day one of the most prevalent pieces of artwork that I saw was actually a landscape shaped painting, and it was water like on the road, and there was all you saw was the hand sticking up from below the water, uh, as if the person was conveying the sense that they were kind of sinking uh, into the oblivion of epilepsy and sinking under all this stress and strain. As I say, all you saw was the hand coming out of the water. And I just thought, what a brilliant, what a phenomenal representation of the experience of living with epilepsy that was. I wish I could remember who it was, but
No,
I'm sure you
I don't remember the artist, so I remember
know.
the painting.
Yeah.
We had another one, but I don't think it was at that show. And this was absolutely brilliant. It was a very large drawing. It was probably 2 feet by 3 feet long. It was a vertical, and it was done in charcoal. And it was tons and tons of little lines. And in the bottom of the image was a globe. And within that globe, there was this tiny, tiny body. And it was more of the psychosocial issues surrounding epilepsy in terms of the isolation and loneliness and feeling like the world kept moving around them, but they just existed in this pocket of nothingness. And
Hmm.
see stuff like that when we see art reflecting psychosocial issues surrounding epilepsy as well: isolation, loneliness, depression, things like that. So it's pretty powerful. Music and the visual arts are incredible for that.
Well, actually, I want to just read you one of the sets of lyrics um, from the album. I'm not going to risk it not playing again, but it actually covers the issue of isolation, and it's actually called "Surrounded in Isolation." And the first verse is, "Surrounded in isolation, together we stand alone. The invisible group and the faceless voice on the other end of the phone. You talk a secret language when you're trying to explain. You try to put it simply, but your efforts are in vain." And that for me, that just that main line, "Surrounded in isolation, together we stand alone," encapsulates exactly how we in the epilepsy community live, and feel. And yes, there's 65 million of us, but actually, it's because I also do work as an epilepsy advocate as well. Uh, People will sometimes reach out to me who are at an early stage of their epilepsy journey, not quite knowing where to go next or where to look or where to turn it, etc. And one of the most common things I hear almost invariably they will say is, "I feel so alone." And how can 65 million people feel completely alone? It sounds ludicrous, but it's absolutely true. So that's where the inspiration for that song came from. Surrounded in isolation, together we stand alone. You know? And the next line, "the invisible group and the faceless voice on the other end of the phone." We are kind of like a faceless group, the invisible group. Um, in September, I went to a Congress event in Lisbon, and one of the sections of the Congress was on stigma, including self-stigma. And obviously, Ian, this is your specialist area as well. And I spoke to one of the presenters at the end, and I said, that was great, that was really good. I said, but if I could kind of play devil's advocate for a moment, I said, I attended an epilepsy congress 15 years ago, which pretty much said exactly the same as you just said today. I said, and I could pretty much bet that in 15 years' time, if I'm at another epilepsy congress, somebody will say exactly the same as you have today. And I said, one of the problems is with these congresses, whilst they, in some ways, they're absolutely fantastic, but essentially, the people who are there are those who already know.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, the
Yeah,
message is gone.
I was just going to add to that there are hundreds of papers that have been published on stigma and epilepsy, and most of them conclude with the comment that we need more funding to investigate this problem further. It is not very helpful. Can I just
No,
add one thing?
yeah,
Firstly, Guy, for all that you've done is absolutely wonderful. I
thank
thought
you.
I would mention one track from your very first album called Lamotrigine.
Yes,
Has a very personal meaning for us, for Isabel and
right,
I,
right.
because Tim's on lamotrigine, and the number of times he's run out of his drugs, and the
Mhm.
number of times we spent New Year's Day wandering around chemist shops trying to get his drugs renewed, it's become part of our life. But it's a wonderful track, lamotrigine, and it will always stay with me with all of those memories. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. Extremely kind words.
Guy, I'm going to
Yeah,
bring up Debbie Arlick. She had a question that says,
yeah.
I'm curious if Guy or anyone here today can comment on possible connections with synesthesia and epilepsy.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, Dr. Michael Trimble, who's another friend of mine in London, was actually talking about this quite recently, actually. There definitely is a connection between epilepsy and synesthesia. I know as a composer with epilepsy, I would say I was possibly borderline synesthesic because there are definitely times when I can look at other artistic media uh, around the experience of epilepsy, and I can look at it and think, I know exactly what that sounds like. In fact, some of the tracks from the Ictal Variations album were exactly that. They were pieces of artwork that I'd seen in Stephen Schachter's book, Visions, and I looked at the image and I thought, yeah, I know what that image sounds like. And so, yeah, there are absolutely, and for some people, it's the other way around. They will listen to a piece of music and they will see it. They will know what it looks like, you know. And I mean, synesthesia again is a really fascinating thing. You know, some people might say that the number 13 smells like uh, wet grass or something like that, or that the number 12 is the wrong color for them, or things like that. So, but yeah, there is definitely absolutely a correlation between epilepsy and synesthesia.
And thank you. I asked because you used the word chromatic when you were
Yeah.
discussing
Hmm.
your writing your piece. And a lot of music, I don't know a lot, but I guess the word I will say a lot. I've heard that a lot of musicians have synesthesia.
Hmm.
And my nephew, who's here with my sister Lori, David, you saw them in the photograph earlier.
Hmm.
I've often wondered if he has synesthesia. He's nonverbal. He has
Hmm.
Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And, we don't know what he thinks or sees or feels. We do see he reacts to music all the time,
Hmm.
sometimes positively, sometimes negatively,
Hmm.
as you've all mentioned here.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about your music.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you all presented this today, Julie and Heidi. Thank you so much for
Well,
introducing me to Guy.
if you reach out to me at my Purple Chorus website, there's actually a contact page
Okay,
on there. So it's basically purplechorus.com,
great. Thank you. I will. Thank you.
and then I will get straight back in touch with you, and we can communicate some more on that.
Roxanne mentioned that her daughter, she doesn't have epilepsy, but she plays the flute, and that playing certain notes, she sees certain colors.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, very plausible. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Terry, thank you so much for the hot water. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. And I will see you very soon. Take care. Yeah. So some of you might have spotted if you were looking at Terry's page or Terry's picture that she has a big dog, and that dog is currently being trained to be her seizure dog. Uh, it's called Bo. It's absolutely amazing dog. Uh, so star appearance, star guest. Um, so next or
We're happy to stay as long as anyone wants to be here and answer
great.
questions, as long as Guy is on the other side of the world for us. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's getting bedtime for him and for Ian as well.
Yeah. Turner, did you want to tell people about your own particular journey, um, or are you happy to do that at another point? Uh, there you are.
Oh, I lost
Yeah.
him.
There we go.
No, he's
Can we
there.
Hold on.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
great. Yeah, well, I'm happy to be here today. Uh, I know Guy talked a little bit about my story and my music, but yeah, for those who don't know me, my name's Turner. I was diagnosed in 2020 at 14. So that was definitely a challenging time, not only because, of course, we went into lockdown from COVID, but the teens, especially that age, I would say, is kind of once you're starting to really figure out who you are as a person and all the different things that you start going into. And for me, I had a good support group, so it wasn't too bad. But there was things that all my friends were doing, that were kind of just considered normal things that I couldn't do. And I always stayed away from alcohol and everything like that. I know a lot of people uh still were into that or something like that and then had to try and quit. So luckily I wasn't at the point where that became a problem for me. But the biggest thing I would say is making sure that I didn't stay out late. And obviously, as a teenager, that's one of the favorite activities, just going out and partying. So at that stage it was a little tough, but there was the other side where being in lockdown you couldn't really go anyways, so it wasn't the worst for that. But um yeah, I've had a bit of an interesting journey because I was stable when I was 16 and able to drive, and then my neurologist decided to take me off of Keppra. And once I went off of Keppra, I had a breakthrough seizure after I think it was about a year of being controlled. And after that, I just had problems and problems. I tried to go back on it, but it didn't work. So then we had to work through a few different combinations. Um, Luckily, I did get stable again. I will be seizure free, hopefully, in the end of the month for about a year now. So looking forward to that. But yeah, I'm back driving. Things are good, but if you I'm not sure if any of you have heard my song Fight the Storm,
Mhm.
which was my first release. I know guys had to listen to it.
Yeah.
Um Joyce, it looks like, has had to listen to it as well. But it's about kind of everything that I was going through at the time, dealing with my epilepsy and my experiences with it. And I wrote it in a way that others who were struggling with other mental health issues or just things that were going on in their life, that they could kind of relate to it. And, you know, I've always used music as a tool for when things are getting hard like that. And so I thought I could kind of share my talent, my story, and hopefully it could do that for other people. And I got some feedback saying that it did just that for some others, which was really really helpful. Um, but yeah, for me, at least right now, things are going good, which I'm very happy about. But I work with Epilepsy Calgary a lot on certain things that they do, and I like to go perform whenever I can, go volunteer my time for them. Um, and yeah, they've been really great to me. So I'm very happy to be supporting that organization. And, I think epilepsy awareness is very important, and it's really important to kind of knock down all the stigma that's behind it, because epilepsy doesn't define us as people. And, I'm just trying to prove that you can have epilepsy and still be doing something you love, going up on the stage and performing no matter what. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Turner?
as I
Oh,
say, you are one of the very, very few um, examples of someone who has taken their own experience of epilepsy and used the platform of music to convey that experience to others. So well done you for being such a rarity.
Turner, if you feel comfortable and you'd like to, would you share your information in the chat so that people can hear your
Yes,
music? And
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
definitely.
I can put my website down where you can find everything about me and my Spotify and Apple Music, everything like that. So there we go.
Marvelous.
You should be able to see it in there.
Can, yeah, it's great. Uh-huh.
it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah,
Are
of
there any
course.
other questions that anyone has for anyone in the audience?
No, doesn't appear so. Ah, well, we said it would be roughly about 90 minutes
Yeah.
uh, till we hit the finishing line, and that's what it appears to be.
Yeah.
Uh,
But we do want to thank everyone for being here. Your presence
mhm,
and participation makes these forums truly special.
mhm.
Thank Lundbeck for sponsoring the
Yeah,
forum. And, our deepest gratitude to Guy, because he's,
thank
as
you.
Julie's mentioned, one of our favorite people in all the world. He's been here with us from the beginning. And we're
Yeah.
grateful that his music and insights are able to inspire
Mhm.
us more.
And
So
special thanks to Joyce and Esther, because for both Joyce and Esther, this is actually being going live tomorrow uh, because of the time zone
that's
difference.
right.
So it's like 9 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, 9 o'clock in the evening here. So it's 9 o'clock tomorrow morning in New Zealand, which is where Esther is, and it's in the early hours of the morning in Malaysia, where Joyce is as well. So this broadcast is actually going across 2 different days, which is quite mad, really. It's 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 about a 24-hour span almost.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, totally crazy. But
yeah.
yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed it. Nice to see you, Polly.
It's wonderful. This is fantastic. Thank you for inviting me. And I finally got my link and everything was good. It was wonderful, brilliant. Turner, I can't wait to see what your music sounds like. I'm super excited. Thanks so much.
Yep.
All right, then we will give you all back your day or your evening and get to bed, Guy and Ian.
Yeah, yes, miss.
Yeah, and thank you so much once again for being here and supporting not just Hidden Truths Project, but all the artists, whatever
Mm.
their medium. And have a great rest of your day or evening.
Yeah, and have a great
Sure.
holidays, everyone. Thanks for
Yes.
joining us.
All the best.